There's no airline in the history of aviation that has generated as much cash in its first 2 years as Akasa has.
50% back-to-back in 2 consecutive years from a deployment standpoint is big.
Our growth is not going to come any more through increased utilization. We think we're utilizing the aircraft plenty already. It's going to come through adding additional aircraft.
In a very short span of time, we're also releasing an app for the freight forwarders.
I think there are multiple ways in which we are continuing to use AI. And, just sort of examples are ways in which our consumers will interact with Akasa through the use of AI. Right? So when I talk about financial foundation, think about that. We've been operating for 2 years and we have not touched a penny of that investment. Very soon, we will have India's lowest cost structure. There's no question in our mind that this is the path that we're headed, and we're headed on a path to profitability. An IPO in the next 1 year? No. There's no chance. A more logical time frame would be 28, like I said, plus or minus, a month, few months here and there.
Vinay Dube and Praveen Iyer, whom you just heard, are 2 of the busiest men in Indian aviation. Their airline Akasa, backed by the Rakesh Jhunjhunwala family, just turned 2. And from the time it was created as an Excel sheet in Dube's laptop on 15th August 2020 to now, it has been quite a flight. Sure, it's been a journey of several firsts and fastests. Fastest airline to get to 20 aircraft and start international flights, first one to allow pets, first to introduce quiet flights. But there has been turbulence too. Some security and data glitches, and a tussle with pilots who quit the airline en masse without serving notice periods and were taken to court by the Akasa management. Yes, this also marked the airline's first year. And then, of course, there have been troubles at its plane supplier, Boeing. Like other customers of Boeing's 737 MAX planes, Akasa is also constantly on tenterhooks thanks to glitches with the aircraft model and production on Boeing's end. That and many other issues have pushed the American plane maker to one of its worst phases. Result, a slowdown in aircraft deliveries. Industry watchers say that these will impact Akasa's growth, staffing, pricing power, and path to profitability. The airline wanted to add 12 to 14 aircraft every year, but can't. It posted a loss of 744 crore rupees in FY23 and likely another one in FY24. So, what does Akasa have to say about all this? Let's find out from the men heading the airline, CEO Dube and Chief Commercial Officer Iyer. It's Friday, the 16th of August. I'm your host Anirban Chaudhary, and this is the Morning Brief. Before we start, I have to tell you that a new show has dropped from the stable of ET podcasts. 7 at 7 is your quick, sharp, sub-5-minute roundup of financial news from India and the world. Do subscribe and listen in on all prominent audio platforms. And now, back to the conversation. Hi Vinay, hi Praveen. Very warm welcome to the Morning Brief. Vinay once again, Praveen for the first time. But very good to have you guys with us.
Thank you. Welcome to Akasa.
Thank you so much for having us around. Yes.
It's a pleasure. So, congratulations on the 2-year milestone, and a lot of other milestones have been achieved on the way. They've been two very good years actually. What would you say, looking back, are the 3 things that you're proudest of and the 3 most bitter lessons?
So Anirban, first I'd say there's really, no element of bitterness. Let me get that one, out of the way. I think we look at these last couple of years with great pride. I think there are a couple of things that really sort of stand out. First and foremost is seeing 4,000 Akasians hard at work. I'll just give you an example. So on the 19th of July, we had this global tech outage. Just to give you a sense that Akasa did not cancel a single flight. And that to me was sort of the culmination of this, culture of dedication, but also culture of practice, this culture of training. And then the other one is just to see the consumers' reactions. whether it's our food, whether it's, we fly you because we know with Akasa we're going to get there on time, right? And obviously, statistically, average shows that we're India's most on-time airline. But the fact that our consumers are saying, oh, thank goodness for Akasa, we now have a choice that we didn't have. It's these two things that, are perhaps the most rewarding when we reflect on the last couple of years.
Right. Would you talk about the lessons then?
So the good news is the way we planned this whole approach, right from the word go, it's been to the world inducting 20 aircraft in a matter of 9 months or so is really tough. We thought the same when we built it on a piece of paper, but the very fact that there was so much of planning that went into it, and more importantly, we executed the plan, it really helped in our favor. I think that made a huge difference in terms of the lessons, in terms of what happened versus what we planned. Lessons learned, frankly, Anirban, there are several lessons that you can learn through the process, right? This business is all about getting better versus what you have achieved. And I think on that front, we have several lessons learned through the process.
Right. One of the things that Akasa has done that you sort of also referred to is a lot of industry firsts. First airline to reach the 20 aircraft mark, first airline to be fastest to start international routes.
600 days of operations, yes.
Right.
On the 600th day of operation, we started our international
flight, right. The softer things like allowing pets, quiet flights, buy a seat adjacent to yourself and all that. So obviously you will say that you did not go for being an industry first, you were going for best practices and building an innovative airline. But are there some that you haven't achieved yet, and what do we expect in, say, the next 1 or 2 years?
There's none, there's no sort of silver bullet kind of huge big ticket item that we have not implemented and achieved that we know of today. So the thought is, I think people just underestimate the singularity of focus of a very sort of generic line that says, run a good airline. That seems a very sort of passé kind of phrase, but that is exactly what we want to do.
Right. And I mean, if I were to go into specifics, the conversations I've had with you, tech has been something that's been sort of a cornerstone for you guys. Are you, for instance, as tech savvy that you had sought out to be?
I'll tell you, we are, and Praveen, can come in with his opinion. But for us, Anirban, if you remember our earlier conversation, it was tech, data, and analytics. It's a combination of those three. So we started the airline with the concept of, consumer data that we were going to be, analyze, every single day. Certainly, the more, visible tech is the web and mobile apps that we have, we continue to invest. I think what many people don't see is the investment we're making in technology related to, safety, the investment in technology related to, operation. You don't get to be India's most on-time airline without tech. And so that focus will continue. We've absolutely not implemented everything that we want to do. And what you're going to see next from a tech perspective is a lot to do with the sort of consumer personalization.
Yeah, that was my next question.
That's correct. Yeah. Mm-hmm. So we want to be able to recognize you as a consumer in real time.
And just to give you an example, not just the consumers, right? And when Vinay says consumer, it means the consumers in the form of a passenger, and also consumers in the form of the trade, and even the cargo freight forwarders.
Sure.
In fact, in a very short span of time, we're also releasing an app for the freight forwarders. So it just clearly goes to show there are areas or pockets of expansion when it comes to tech, which is on the passenger side. But what needs evolution is also on the cargo side. And we believe in focusing on all.
Will you be the only airline in India with an app for freight forwarders?
No, there is another airline that's already got the app.
Okay.
We'll probably be the second.
Yeah, okay. And stock question to you, since we're talking about tech, how do you incorporate AI in all this? And I'll be a little more specific. I mean, when you say customer facing, I'd heard this somewhere that Akasa eventually plans to make its app multilingual, maybe even have a braille section. Are these something still on the anvil? And of course, my original question on how does AI come into all this, stitched into all this?
So these are all still very relevant. And it's differently enabled, so it's not one form of disability, but these are government mandates that are in place today that we must comply. So that's not something for the future, that's something that we have in place today. Of course, we'll continue to find ways to improve it. In terms of multilingual capabilities, as we expand internationally, these are just natural evolutions that will come from a language capability. So these are all in the works. From an AI perspective, I think there are multiple ways in which we are continuing to use AI. And, just sort of examples are ways in which our consumers will interact with Akasa through the use of AI. That's an AI solution that we're in the process of implementing. So you can get, much more sort of natural language capabilities in the ways in which consumers interact with, with us, that can learn over a period of time.
Have we come to a stage where AI can be used in very core back-end functions like fleet management and revenue management? And is Akasa's model sort of given to using those tools?
So there are different forms of AI that I think have different levels of application. So to answer your question concisely, yes, there are applications of AI today in perhaps not the same version or form of AI that people associate with
large language models.
Language models, but absolutely are learning models, but not large language related learning models, but data related learning models that are already being used.
Okay. This is something I've always wanted to ask. And this is a good question to ask you now that you're a 2-year-old airline with a fairly robust network and international operations the sky is the limit for you. How more nimble-footed are you when it comes to choosing your next destination? How does that really happen? Both of you maybe.
No, I think with this one, I'll sit back and relax and Praveen can answer.
Sure. So quite frankly, it's nothing but sticking to basics. The network that you see now and the destinations that you see now is an output based on analytics that runs in the background. So in the decision-making set or the data set that we probably have 70, 80 destinations with us.
That you don't fly to yet.
Yes. So we analyze all this and you prioritize them based on several factors. Factor one, what's the competition like? What's been the historical trend? Pre-COVID, post-COVID, a lot of things have changed. How are the fares evolving in these markets? What's the kind of connection that we create out of these? Because let's face it, is it going to add incremental value to the network or is it going to be a standalone?
And you have your international thing also at the back of your mind.
Absolutely. So those factors are extremely critical. And of course, we look at a channel mix. Where is the contribution coming from? Are we playing to our strengths? And we might as well play to our strengths. So the question of why Bombay today and a Bangalore tomorrow or vice versa is purely a reflection of your strength and playing to your strengths. And that enables you to manage the operation side better as well.
Got it. But also, I started my question with the word nimble-footed, with the adjective. So what we usually see is many airlines, they usually track, some of them mirror the progression that one airline takes. So the moment you go to the Kuwait, for instance, an IndiGo comes with its muscle and pricing, etc. Then what do you do? I mean, do you have that in mind that, yes, we are going to a sector which is really, really lucrative and we are aware that competition comes. So do you have the pricing, the slots, everything at the back of your mind? Because this will happen.
So when you launch your route, Anirban, by definition, you need to realize that you're going to grow the market. Way back in 2005, Bombay had not more than 10 departures per day each way. Today it's sitting at 55. So clearly, as you add capacity, there is growth that you will witness. Your action versus a competitor's action is something which you simulate by definition. Because, and it's important you simulate that. Because you need to have plan A, plan B, plan C. And more importantly, you need to sell the network.
Right.
And let's face it, I mean, we are 24 aircraft new today. We keep adding. Competition can keep coming after us. But when you get that scale and size, you start hurting yourself. Because if your intent is to hurt somebody, you start hurting yourself.
Got it. But and you've been asked, I'm sure, the duopoly question several times. But I'll just simplify it and ask you: would you call yourself a victim of predatory pricing sometime, or are you strong enough now to sort of fight back with your own?
I would say absolutely not. We don't consider ourselves victims in any way.
Yeah, sure.
Let me just be very clear.
Targets then?
We're not at all. Not at all. Neither.
Not at all. In fact, the trends that we see on the fares, on the maturity that this market is showing up, is just remarkable. I remember the days, pre-COVID days, the kind of price war and the predatory pricing that used to happen versus what we're seeing today. It's so much more mature. The conversations that you're having with the trade, for example, is around push the fares up. The conversations with the trade historically used to be just stump the price, just give the lowest fare, just give the cheapest. People have realized over a period of time that this industry cannot sustain at certain levels, and more importantly, let's face it, Feb 2020 versus August 2021, and I keep giving this example all the time, 3,200 departures a day domestic is sitting at 3,000 departures today. The number of seats have gone up, yes, but clearly the CAGR over a period of 4.5 years is about 1.52%. So there is so much of pent-up demand that's coming, and the catch-up game happens only in about 7 to 8 years, even if you see the lineup of all the aircraft coming in. So there is no reason why somebody would get into predatory pricing, and that's exactly what we're seeing. Nobody's doing it.
Right. So coming to capacity increase, you've consistently said that 50% capacity increase is what you plan, but you aim for, I think, this fiscal.
This fiscal 50%.
Yes. And capacity increase would obviously mean ASK, but perhaps not the amount of aircraft that you had planned to add. So what is the solution? Just higher utilization? And would you give me numbers?
No, I think from a utilization perspective, we're north of 13 already.
That's
13 hours. I just want to make sure because, this is a number that we have not necessarily, articulated in this direct manner in the past. And so people have tried to make calculations, etc. So I just want to come out and say that, if people were to make calculations in the month of August, we're north of 13 hours already. So our growth is not going to come any more through increased utilization. We think we're utilizing the aircraft plenty already. So it's going to come from now on. It's going to come through adding additional aircraft.
Okay, but then, so you're hamstrung there to an extent because...
I would not call us hamstrung. Like I said, from an aircraft delivery perspective and a growth perspective, the choices we're facing is, do we grow at 300% or 270%, right? And that's the growth that we had, in the previous fiscal year. This year, it's 50% versus 60% versus 40% versus 80%. So, when we're growing faster than any other airline in India, on a percentage basis, when we have grown faster than any other airline in the world ever, I wouldn't call that hamstrung, right? So if Usain Bolt were to run 9.68...
No, in relation to your own estimate.
No, I understand. But I just want to put things in perspective. So when Usain Bolt runs at 9.68%, someone may call him hamstrung because he's done 9.58%. But let us for a minute say it's 9.68. It's still faster than literally anybody else in the world has run.
And how small the base was, right? Initially, you're talking about a very small base.
Sure.
And as you keep growing, 50% back-to-back in 2 consecutive years from a deployment standpoint is big.
But when you have a supplier whose problems aren't going to go away very soon. In fact, I was just reading about another electrical component problem that they're having now. They call it a non-conforming element. NTSB has said something very uncomplimentary about Boeing. So there is no amount of contingency that will take all of this into account, that can take all of this. So one part of your drawing board must be fluid right now, right? I mean, you must have had to change some stuff of your planning when this has come in.
So Anirban, I'll tell you, people think, and I'll give you an analogy over here. People think that we have irregular operations once every 5 days, once every 20 days, once every 3 months. But the fact is, most airlines of any size have irregular operations every single day.
Every single day,
right?
yeah.
Life is full of irregular operations. So when you talk about changing the drawing board, we're changing the drawing board every day for a variety of reasons. That's the point of being nimble. That's the point of being non-complacent, right? We're not complacent at all. We're nimble. But the strategic direction that the company is taking on the base that we have built is not changing, right? So we have got a 226, aircraft order, the most sort of modern fuel-efficient jets. We bought them, as you know, at a time where the economics of purchasing these aircraft were in our favor. And, the same thing goes for this modern jet and engine maintenance. And that's 70% of our economics. So 70% of our economics were cemented at perhaps the most opportune time in the 120-year history of aviation, right? That's the base we're setting on. Everything else, these are minor deviations here and there that we're happy to deal with.
But you must be asking really tough questions to Boeing. What are they telling you? I know this is between you and Boeing. That's what
and there's some things between us and Boeing. And so, absolutely, we're in very, very deep touch with Boeing. I'll say they're a good partner to Akasa, right? There's nothing on the air that I'm going to say about Boeing other than the fact that they're good partners to Akasa.
So you've recently said that you don't need to hire pilots anymore. But now, given fears of a deeper slowdown in Boeing's deliveries in the near future, I wanted to ask if there's a possibility that Akasa could find itself in a situation where you have excess pilot strength that you would need to trim.
Absolutely not. So we will not be trimming. Let me put that, right out there. That has never been a thought, and that is not going to happen.
Right. You've sort of aired fairly terse, straightforward comments on bilaterals and what's the sort of the fact that it's not open as it used to be, etc. And, how will airlines grow if bilaterals are not opened up more? There's enough and more demand for both sides to add capacity.
I hope people haven't viewed my comments as being terse. I'll sort of reiterate what I said. And what I said was that, look, bilaterals are really decisions that our government makes. And what I said was that I fully trust our government to be able to balance the imperative that they have in their trade negotiations with the very specific effect that a bilateral right is going to have, expanding or not expanding, on consumers. So I have not gone beyond that, Anirban, and I maintain it today.
But do you feel, I won't use the word hamstrung again, but do you feel constrained in terms of the ambitions that you have in certain sectors that you're not able to go to because
See, our ambitions aren't in certain sectors. Our ambition is as an airline as a whole.
Yeah.
So if one sector is full, we've got 50 others to fly to. We never feel hamstrung. The part that we want to convey is the Indian economy has fired and will continue to fire in a manner that, literally the world is our oyster. There's no sense that if this sector is full, what are we going to do? No, we'll fly to many more. I mean, look at the fact that in the month of August, almost 20%, shy of 20% of our network is international. How can anyone call that constrained? But Anirban, I think from a long-term perspective, which is why we don't sweat, 1 month, 1 week. What we're building really is an airline that is financially robust. We're building an airline that has a financial foundation that allows us to think in that manner.
And that's a good segue to my last set of questions on financials. Now, first, is the 375 crore funding that you received from the Jhunjhunwala family in FY22 that shows up on your balance sheet also, is that the only fundraising you've done yet?
Yeah, that's the only one we have. It's the only one we have. And let me tell you that by the end of July, so it's the 14th of August today, right? So I'm giving you a 14-day-old statistic. We had more than that in terms of cash in our bank account, right? So when I talk about financial foundation, think about that. We've been operating for 2 years and we have not touched a penny of that investment.
So, and that's how you're funding your losses as well.
100%. There's no doubt. I mean, every early stage company has losses. There's no doubt about that, right? Look at the fact that our EBITDA percentage has gone, up by 30%. Look at the fact that our unit profitability is up 60% year over year, right? So losses are one thing. But like I said, there's no airline in the history of aviation that has generated as much cash in its first 2 years as Akasa has.
When would you be comfortable in sharing with me a target year of making money?
When we've done it. But what I can tell you is that we are far ahead of our plans, and we're on pace with the best companies in the world in terms of when we, expect to cross that mark.
No, sorry to interrupt, but what makes you so confident? I mean, I know you're calling it a small hurdle, this Boeing disruption, but it is very much here to stay for a while. And back home, the airline business isn't getting any easier. There's increased competition from the duopoly that we spoke about. You've now started your international operations. That cannot be very easy. So what are the things that make you confident about Akasa achieving profitability soon?
Yeah. So Anirban, the most the two very, very fundamental drivers for us of profitability, one of which is, highly deterministic. And that's to do with our cost structure, right? We are on a path to being, India's most efficient airline when it comes to cost. There are, three principal factors that will drive it. One is scale, right? Clearly with scale, you have economies of scale. An airline with 50 aircraft, 75 aircraft plus doesn't need 2 CEOs, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. So you get a lot of economies of scale with size. The second one is international, and international has two benefits when it comes to cost. One is it has a larger stage length, and longer stage length flights tend to have reduced cost. And benefit number two is the taxes are very different on fuel, for example, right? And so scale, number one, international, number two, and then certain, what we call gauge, which is number of seats per aircraft, but that comes with aircraft types. So for example, if you look at some of our competitors, they're flying a 321. Now, when you look at the unit costs of a 321, they're very, very different compared to a 320. The 321 has a much lower unit cost compared to a 320, right? And some of our competitors are flying, maybe 40% of their fleet with that. Our equivalent is the MAX 10. Very, very, very efficient airline compared to even the 8s that we're flying today, which is an incredibly efficient aircraft. So when we get a very significant number of our fleet coming in MAX 10s, when we've got a large percentage internationally, and when we have scale, we're on a deterministic path for all three of these. And when you put them all together, very soon we will have India's lowest cost structure.
So yes, and that should bolster your margins. But from what I saw, Akasa's EBITDA margins for FY23 were a negative 61%. So would you first of all, of course, confirm that number? And secondly, what is Akasa doing about it?
So I won't confirm the numbers. I will say on a year-over-year basis, our EBITDA margins have improved by 30%. Secondly, absolutely, I can confirm to you that international is more profitable than domestic. There's no question about that. And that's the reason, as we chase profitability, we've gone up in the month of, August to just shy of, 20%, and this is only going to grow. So I can confirm both to you is correct. And the second part is unit revenues, right? Unit revenues go up over time based on a number of factors, right? As we get scale, we're able to attract more corporates. They come with higher revenue. And when you put these together, there's no question in our mind that this is the path that we're headed, and we're headed on a path to profitability.
Fine. So, a senior executive from Akasa recently said that it'll achieve profitability in 5 years. So would you reiterate that?
Sure. Absolutely.
From now?
No. From the time we started. Yeah, absolutely. From the time we started. Yeah.
And finally, and I'm sorry to be presumptuous, but whenever a company gives out feelers about its financial performance, that it's doing well, it's positive, etc., it is usually on the path to fundraising. So is Akasa looking at an IPO soon?
No, I mean, an IPO in the next 1 year, no. There's no chance. We'll have to have more history. A more logical time frame would be 28, like I said, plus or minus, few months here and there.
So there you have it. Akasa has an IPO plan for 2028, and you heard it first on the morning brief. The path won't be easy. Whatever Vinay says, Boeing's problems are here to trouble its customers for a while now. Akasa knows that it has to scale up fast to take on the virtual airline duopoly of IndiGo and Air India group. And scaling up fast is difficult when you are not getting the number of plane deliveries that you had estimated every year. But Akasa's plans don't seem to have derailed yet. The airline is growing, it has a control on costs, and enough cash to not just fund its losses, but also invest in mutual funds, as its latest balance sheet has shown. It has survived and grown with just one round of internal funding and no external funding at all. Will these make it profitable in 3 years, as Vinay says, and a healthy listed entity in 4? Let's see. You were listening to this corner office conversation on the Morning Brief. It was produced by Surohini Jain and Vinay Joshi, sound designed by Rajas Naik. A new episode of TMB drops every Tuesday, Thursday and Friday, while 7 at 7, our new podcast drops every weekday, Monday to Friday, sharp at 7 a.m. Stay tuned, keep listening. This is your host Anirban Chaudhary signing off. Have a good weekend.